Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Monday, July 20th, 2020, and the time now is 9:05. I apologize. I guess my watch is 10 minutes slow. That being said, notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Monday, July 6th, and the second notice was issued on Wednesday, July 15th. The committee will hear and accept testimony on Bill 282-35 LS, the Fiscal Year 2021 Appropriation Act as requested by the Governor, relative to the Department of Administration Fiscal Year 2021 budget request. Joining me for this budget hearing is, to my immediate right, is Senator Regine Besco-Lee. On the second level, I would have Senator Mary Camacho Torres, Senator Therese Sarlai, and Senator Thelo Tadigui. The general rules for this budget hearing: those testifying on behalf of the department, such as the director and the deputy director of Department Administration, is hereby recognized by myself, and they are ready seated in the panel. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and then testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. My colleagues and panel, we are discussing Bill Budget 2021. We may ask some questions in reference to 2020, but it should be minimized. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, I will ask you now to please remain in the room for further questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and title for the record. I'd like to also recognize we are also joined by my fellow colleague, Senator Kelly Mars Taito. I will now ask the Sergeant Arms, ask the panel from the Department of Administration to rise and for our Sergeant Arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. Mr. Byrne, if you will now begin your testimony for your budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and Senators, my name is Edward Byrne, Director of the Department of Administration. With me is Edith Pangilinan, Deputy Director. Thank you for the opportunity of presenting our budget for fiscal year 2021. We would like to outline the responsibilities of the department and later present our organization and some of the challenges with which we deal every day. Department of Administration is at the heart of the government, providing financial, human resources, and procurement services to the line agencies of the government and to some other units. We perform these services so that the line agencies can concentrate on their core functions and to ensure that these services are available at the highest level of professionalism and with consistent standards. It is our goal to deliver these services efficiently, professionally, responsibly, and equitably. Every member of staff at DOA understands these goals and knows that it is the policy of the department to deliver them. We cannot operate without competent staff, and I would like to say that I am proud of the staff at DOA. They work hard, often having to overcome communication difficulties with other departments. I am particularly proud of the work that they have done during this public health emergency. They have taken on additional responsibilities and work. We were operating during the main government shutdown, providing our usual services and making sure that employees and vendors were paid. We strive for efficiency, and we are on the vanguard of moving the government to paperless processes. Electronic storage and processing is eco-friendly and far more efficient, allowing multiple access to data with instant retrieval. The recent payment by direct deposit of the majority of unemployment claims is an example of the advantages of an electronic system. Many of our vendors are paid by EFT, and almost all of the line agency's employees enjoy direct deposit. Communications and information transfer are integral to our continuing commitment to efficiency. DOA is a pilot agency for the trial of Microsoft Teams, an integrated communication and storage application using web-based protocols. I am very happy with the initial results of this trial. The Deputy and I will review with you the departmental structure and achievements, but here are a few highlights which showcase the responsibilities of DOA. Division of Accounts processed transactions totaling about 1.3 billion annually. With the funds recently available from federal sources in support of the government's efforts to combat the effects of COVID-19, that throughput has doubled and indeed maybe tripled. Human Resources Division is the Personnel Resources Division for over 3,000 employees, processing 4,000 personnel actions annually and over 10,000 applications, including recently the census workers recruited for the 2020 census. General Services Agency processes about 90 million procurement activities annually, with a mandate to comply with local and federal statutes and regulations. They also were called upon to work outside the box to support the COVID-19 effort and associated activities. We cannot carry out or complete our mission without resources. We are a fiscal department, and so we well understand fiscal tensions and dynamic budgeting. Our budget request this year includes, for the first time for many years, investment in technology, as well as staff funding. I spoke earlier of efficiency. We need this technological investment to achieve our stated goals. The agency has many old, failing computer workstations and peripherals. This is a risk, and we ask you to consider our budget request with all these concerns in mind. Department of Administration thanks the legislature for its support, without which it would not be able to carry out its mandate. Its job is important, and it is well aware of its responsibility in its contribution to good government. General government costs as a percentage of total government spending amounts to about 6%. This compares well when matched against other governments in the United States. The more so when the fact that the government of Guam performs governmental duties which in the states are divided between different levels of government. Senators, thank you again for your support for the Department of Administration. We look forward to working with you so that the fiscal 2021 budget can be finalized. Thank you. And if I may, I'm going to ask Edith to go through the presentation which we have brought with us today. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of your committee. This morning, we do have a slide presentation, very briefly.
Stand by. And I'd like to also recognize, we're also joined by Senator Moylan and Senator Will Castro. All right, go ahead, Ms. Edith.
Okay. So the Department of Administration comprises of 3 divisions, like the director had shared with you this morning, we do have Division of Accounts, Human Resources Division, and GSA. The Division of Accounts is charged to provide for a uniform financial management system and the related systems of internal accounting controls for line organizations of the government. The division also provides the following services: systems management, technical support, payroll accounting and services, appropriation and encumbrance accounting, financial reporting, accounts payables and receivables, daily cash collection activities, deposit and invest revenues for the government of Guam, federal grants and contracts, bank reconciliations, maintenance of subsidiary ledgers, fixed assets, inventory, and debt services management. That department, we have had a vacancy for the longest time, even before we came on board. So that's pretty much a challenge right now, as we see the director has been tasked to really handle all the financial, pretty much. Then we have the deputy, the administrative support, of course, the treasurer's office, payroll division, and accounting falls under the division of accounts. Next, please. Okay. So the essential functions of division of accounts is financial management system, wide support and controls, appropriation revenue and CIP bonds, general ledger, accounts receivables, travel and bank reconciliation, federal grants management and single audit compliance, cash management, which involves the Treasurer of Guam and payroll services. Some of the challenges today for some of the for division of accounts, including payroll and treasury, is one, we have outdated financial management information system software. Two, outdated computer workstations and lack of computer work software programs to promote efficiency. Three, departments and agencies transitioning from paper to electronic format. Four, departments and agencies are not on the FMIS TPS system to record collection of monies, which may result in fraud, waste, and abuse. Five, Department of Administration and Department of Revenue and Taxation systems must be interfaced with each other, allowing data to provide real-time monies and collection of revenues. Next, Division of Human Resources. Human Resources is the central pillar for departments and agencies and is responsible for activities spanning a variety of core functions. HR activities fall under the following core functions: staffing, employee training and development, compensation, safety and health, employee benefits, and labor relations. Human resources development, as the theory, is a framework for the expansion of human capital within an organization through the development of both the organization and the individual to achieve performance improvement. This division is staffed with a personnel services administrator, an assistant personnel services administrator, which is vacant currently. Then we have the administrative support, classification and pay branch, recruitment branch and direct free workplace, test development and validation branch, employee management relations branch, records branch, training and development, employee benefits, and the EEO program. Division of Human Resources, the essential functions include recruitment and selection, classification, employee benefits, managing employee relations, training and development. The challenging tasks that we're faced today: one, employee wage and salaries; two, compliance with laws and regulations, constant changes in health insurance procurement laws; three, training and development, leadership workforce development; four, recruitment and retention and employee attrition; and five, updating of the Department of Administration rules and regulations. Next. And the last division is General Services Agency. GSA administers a centralized procurement program activities for departments and agencies by promoting economical efficiency and effectiveness in the procurement of supplies, materials, equipment, and services. This division is also responsible for providing warehousing activities, and TENDA for departments and agencies. This division includes a chief procurement officer, an assistant chief procurement officer, their admin staff. We have central purchasing, controls, surplus management, the TENDA, and warehouse and records management. GSA's essential functions include central purchasing, surplus management, the TENDA, warehouse storage, and records management. Some of the challenges today are the on-base procurement system, which does not interface with the FMIS system. Departments and agencies, number of users on the on-base procurement system is limited. 3, unable to adequately replenish stock and order in bulk of highly used office supplies and commodities. 4, the building warehouse facility is in dire need of major repairs. And 5, the departments and agencies continuously store documents and files but have not prepared necessary documents to dispose of the records. So that's the 3 divisions that fall under our agency. Thank you.
And if I could turn to the last slide, please. Senators, this is a comparison of the funds that actually flow through Department administration. I've shown a column for the fiscal 2020 request, what was eventually appropriated in fiscal 2020, the actual expenditure to date, but we've also added a forecast for what we think the expenditure for each of these categories is going to be by the end of the year. Now, some of that may well be available to be funded by CARES Act, but this is just a gross amount of what we expect the expenditure to be. And the last column is the fiscal 2021 fiscal request, which actually lines up pretty well with the forecast for 2020. Thank you, Senators. We're ready to answer you and respond to your questions.
Thank you, Ed. I got a few questions I want to ask you before I ask my colleagues to ask you questions. How much COVID federal assistance will the department be receiving this calendar year or fiscal year FY 2020 and extended to FY 2021? And how will the assistance impact the department's request? Or are you getting any COVID money? Let's start with that.
Yes. The total COVID money that we've got to date, which unusually for a federal grant was given to us up front rather than as costs were incurred, was 117 million, which was basically received in April. BBMR divided up that amount of money and produced a budget which was submitted to the legislature. And that budget includes categories for many departments. For DOA, the money basically was allocated for a new FMIS system that can cope with the stresses and strains that are put on the current system, in particular because of the CARES Act throughput. I mentioned earlier that the throughput through the department has doubled, and we're having to do that with the current system. And a lot of that has had to be done manually because of that. So we have put in a request into the CARES Act money for money to fund a new system that will cope with these stresses much more efficiently. I mentioned also that some of this is going to be paperless. It's eco-friendly, but it's also, frankly, much more sanitary if we don't have to pass pieces of paper around. So with that in mind, we have about 7 million in the CARES Act funding to fund this particular project.
All right. Does your department have any outstanding retro employment salary payment as a result of the Competitive Wage Act of 2014? And if so, how many employees and what is the status of these payments? Public Law 36-35 authorized department to liquidate any such obligations. Are you up to date or are you still ongoing?
Senator, we have sent out to each of the line agencies involved.
I'm just referring to DOA, just to DOA, because each agency answers for that.
DOA, no.
None.
I think it's like less than 20,000 that's outstanding, the DOA.
Okay, less than 20,000, did
Yeah.
you say that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to be able to take care of that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, because and the reason why I cut you off on that one is because every department's asked that question, and I expected them to respond to you, and I'm going to come to a question that will ask you that, all right? Are the departments, GMA, GVB, the judiciary, mayors, et cetera, allotments remitted on a timely manner? Is everybody getting their allotments as scheduled?
Yes, sir. And it's one of the achievements I think the DOA can be very proud of, that these recipients can rely upon their allotments going out timely in the full amount. And certainly I get fewer phone calls.
All right,
when that
that's
happens.
great. Now I'll go back to that question, now reference the department. What is the status of personal actions submitted by the departments? How are they going along? You know, any of the line agencies that have asked to hire folks or demote them or close out the retro pay and stuff, how is that coming along?
I'm sorry, Senator, you're asking about the personnel actions?
Yes, personal actions, that's correct, personal actions. Submitted by the line agencies. How is that coming along? Is that moving along, or is there appear to be a waiting until we hear a court hearing, or do we get a suit?
Oh, no. Do you want to answer that?
No, Mr. Chair, that's not the case. As you know, during the COVID, of course, there was some a holdback on processing, but we are back to normalcy since we opened back on June 1st. But along that line, we were recruiting for the public health personnel that was needed to assist in this COVID-19. So there was no delay other than just because of the COVID-19. But since Governor Guam went back to full operations as of June 1st, the departments are coming in, we're processing, we're putting out announcements, and all that processing has taken place. So there's no delay.
Okay. So everything is moving along?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. What is the status of purchase orders submitted by the departments? The line agencies now across the board, how are we going along with these POs? Are they moving, or are they just, all of a sudden somebody's too smart for the PO? And I'm very curious, I don't mean to say that too negative, but too many departments call my office, and they probably call all the senators saying, we're waiting, and there's got to be some urgency, because a lot of this has to do with COVID and relate to preparing for their opening and stuff, and we just want to get some answers. Are they moving along? Is there a problem at GSA? Let's start with that, because that's where the procurement POs go.
Well, yes, Senator, they are moving along. Are they moving along quickly enough? No, they're not moving along quickly enough. Several reasons for that. First of all, there are a lot of them. And we need to look and try and consolidate some of these purchase orders. I looked at the number of purchase orders that we have to issue for just office supplies, and it was nearly 300 in this fiscal year. And that's a lot of work unnecessarily, because necessarily, as you can see from that number, the average value of the purchase order is fairly low. And we don't want to spend our effort on low purchase orders. What we need to do is spend our effort on the high-value purchase orders or the more risky ones. So we are looking at that. We are looking at making sure that GSA, which traditionally was kind of understaffed, but in this budget is much better staffed, gets their full complement of buyers. Most of the buying is actually done by the line agency departments. So some of the delays to which you refer and to which they complain about. And I also am the recipient of some of those phone calls. Some of that is and I don't want to attribute blame, but some of that could be better dealt with by the department. Sometimes what's being requested is not well defined. Sometimes what's being requested just isn't available. But communications between GSA and the departments is critical, and we want to make sure that is optimized. At the end of last fiscal year, in order to make sure that federal funds weren't left unspent because of these procurement delays, we brought together all the departments in one room, and we scheduled them for attendance at GSA so that while they were processing their requests through the GSA system, if there was an issue or a problem, they could be dealt with there and then, because communication was face-to-face. Maybe a little bit more difficult under present circumstances to bring people face-to-face, but we do intend to repeat that exercise this year to make sure that federal funds are appropriately spent.
All right, thank you. What is the role of the accountant one for the Guam Charter School? That's in your office. So are they able to meet all the criteria as what was met by DOE before? Now it's on your backyard.
Yes, and I think it's working much better. And they're getting their allotments. Each school is getting their allotments as they requested, within the rules, as they request it. We haven't been called upon to supply much other support at the moment, but we have a recruitment pending for a clerical support for the charter schools. But as far as the general day-to-day movement of funds, it's working very much better, and we don't have the difficulty that the DOE had when they were administering it with the procurement issues. We've worked through them. There was an issue with prior year appropriations to one of them, and basically we've worked through that too during this year.
All right, good, great. What is the status of, you have 26,833 in miscellaneous contract for charter school for as compared to in FY2020, 6,500. Could you explain that? Or would you prefer I direct that towards the charter schools and ask them why there's a difference? Miscellaneous contracts for charter school. It was 26,833, now it's 6,500. Are you familiar with that one? If not, I'll direct it towards the charter schools.
No, Senator.
All right. The director's budget includes utilities. Can you? Utilities? Do you have you have a? I mean, I thought you're all under the governor's office, and we would love to see you send that bill to her and make her pay it. But
utilities is one of the issues that we had, making sure that the process of the then paperwork, which we're now trying to deal with in a different way, as I explained, was coming through from the line agencies. For reasons that are outside my expertise, many of the line agencies have many individual meters for electricity and for water. And it was difficult to determine that we had, when we closed, where we found out that we had not received the billings for some months. So what we're proposing to do is to make sure that all the bills come to DOA. Utility billings, really, there's not much reason to think that they're incorrect. We have had some incidences of some incorrect ones, but they were so grossly exaggerated that we were able to pull them out and deal with them separately. So DOA is going to process those billings, charge them out to the departments, report to the departments what was spent because it's part of their budgets. But we believe that by using this process, their budgets and their actuals will be much more up to date than they have been heretofore.
All right. The limited gaming fund may not meet its revenue due to COVID-19 and mandated federal ban related to like cockfighting and even the recent court action. I'm talking about limited gaming. And in FY 2021, you requested $32,568 from limited gaming fund for a copier machine. How many copier machines are you going to get?
Frankly, Senator, I don't know how many copying machines we're going to get,
Okay.
but I will let you know.
All right, I was just curious, 32,000 is quite a few copier machines.
It's the number of copies that generally determines the cost, but and
So you pretty much like, it's like a lease on the machine?
yes.
And then you pay for the paper? Okay,
and
I
we
understand.
pay for the number of copies.
Understood.
As I said, we're trying to reduce it, but and scanning is actually, we can use these machines to do scanning, which is free, and that's what we're proposing to do.
Okay. You have a 4,552 for the division of accounts contract. For 2021, what is that contract for? Is there something going on over there that, $4,500 contract? I mean, is that a copier also, or?
It probably is. I'll have to find that out. The biggest contract that the Division of Accounts has is obviously the audit contract, which is separately included here. And we also have to administer the OPEB actuarial valuation, which is included in the accounting.
All right.
thing. But it's more than that. So we will let you know if we may.
Okay. On your last page on your presentation, we deals with the FY 2021 budget. As I go down the line, judge's pension. What is that? Is that the retirement? What is that? Is that the insurance?
It's the retirement. It's a pension contribution for judges who are not part of they're not paid through the regular pension deduction. It's a separate appropriation.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking that question is because as other autonomous agencies, they pay their retirees. Am I correct? They pay their pension. And I'm trying to understand how a third branch of government requires another branch of government to pay their pension when they should have budgeted for that. I'm just trying to get an understanding of that.
Yes,
Could you
sir.
please explain that?
No, you're right. It is an anomaly. It comes out of the general fund. I mean, I guess you could conclude that, since the general fund does indeed fund most of the judiciary's costs, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference because we would have to give them the funding from the general fund allotment anyway to pay for it.
But the reason why I'm asking that, Ed, is that that's the pension, that's the retirement, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, how about insurance for other retirees? That's also part of this package, the judge's pension?
Yes, that's in the retiree health. That's in the retiree health.
No, but other than judges, if you have any judiciary retirees, are they part of this judge's pension?
No, sir. They're
So,
in the
how much
retiree
more?
health.
How much more is DOA, is the general fund paying for this out of DOA's budget? Because I know that you're the one that has to make sure that the funds are there. How much is it on the insurance then, or retirement? Because you got judge's pension. What other?
Again, I'm going to have to guess, and I would like to go back and check.
Okay, if you could please, and you can get back to us. I'm just very curious because we did review their budget, and I didn't see anything to do with pension. They are the third branch of government, and I want to just keep them where they're at. Sure, it's all going to come from the general fund. That's understood. But when it's itemized of where it's going, and everybody understands why their budget is high, because they got to pay their pension. They got to pay their insurance for retirees and so forth. And we just move on from there.
Yes,
Because if the autonomous can do it, so can they.
Yes, it is an anomaly, and for their active employees, they have their own policy. For their retired employees, they have the Gov1 policy.
All right. Okay, thank you. Senator Lee, do you have any questions, ma'am, before I proceed down? And we'll begin with Senator Tello, and then we work down the second level, and then the last one will be Senator Will Castro.
Sujus Masi, Mr. Chair, and Buenas. Good morning, Mr. Director. Thank you for being here. And I was listening to your presentation, and I agree with you that DOA is the heart of Guam. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank the DOA team for keeping the fiscal and HR and other administrative functions of the government running to continue to provide these critical government functions for the people of Guam, but especially during the course of the pandemic for the last few weeks and months. And also, as the chair had mentioned, I also want to just thank DOA. We've been in some challenging times previously where certain agencies did not receive their allotments in a timely fashion. And so I think we're in a new era, hopefully. And so I just want to thank you for continuing that. You know, we only can appropriate so much. That's where, you know, our duties end, and then you ensure that these agencies get the cash. So we just want to thank you for doing that work and for making sure that that gets that these agencies receive the cash that's been appropriated. I did want to ask you, Mr. Byrne, on the pandemic unemployment assistance. An executive order allowed the Department of Administration to recover costs that are associated with your work to pay out benefits under PUA. So to date, can you tell the committee how much of these costs have been incurred by DOA, and where you are in that reimbursement process? So again, this is for pandemic unemployment assistance.
Yes, thank you, Senator. We're in the middle of paying out the pandemic checks and direct deposits. Included in the application for funding was something like $4 million available for administration. So far, this is the third week that we've been involved in making out payments. So, and we've had people work overtime in order to be able to do that. So my estimate would be that so far we've incurred about $25,000. But we are very early into that process. It goes through the end of the year. So we will make sure that DOA, I'm sure it's in all our best interests, and especially of DOA, to make sure that it recovers the appropriate amount from the administration allotment that came from federal funding.
Great, thank you very much, Director Byrne. And yes, if you could keep the committee apprised with how that's going, that would be helpful. I know that the chair had asked a question about contractual services, and so I just kind of wanted to dig a little bit deeper. It looks like there's a 13% increase in contractual services from FY2020 to the requested amounts in FY21. So can you elaborate a little bit more on this increase? And I know that the chair alluded to the possibility of administrative support provided by DOA to the Guam Charter Schools Council. So I just wanted to see, I'm specifically talking about Schedule B, contractual services in your request. So there's a 13% increase in the director's office, increases in the limited division of accounts for limited gaming, and then charter school administrative support. So if I could just give you an opportunity to talk about those increases.
Yes, thank you, Senator. On Schedule B, there's a listing of some of the main services that we've had to acquire. The biggest of them is the top line, which is the health insurance actuarial consultant. This is a complex issue, and the work that the actuarial consultant does is, I guess you would call it pretty detailed. Right? We look at claims, we look at claim trends, we look at medical cost trends. So some of that has to the biggest amount is obviously attributed to that. As you can see, some of the other things are actually a decrease because of our attempts to make sure that we reduce the amount of paper. Having said that, obviously, this includes supplies, and during the course of the last few weeks, we sent out checks totaling almost 300 million. Each of those checks needs an envelope, and each of those checks needs postage. So we're trying to make sure that those costs, like you were asking earlier about the POA costs, gets into the right pocket. But eventually, we're going to have to bear some of those ourselves. The other big item here is the thing I mentioned earlier, is the actuary for the OPED calculation. You know, the OPED calculation is put into the financial statements. We do that calculation on behalf of both the line agencies and the component units, the autonomous agencies. And it involves an actuarial exercise to determine what the amount that we have to include in our balance sheet for the present value of basically the health insurance costs that we bear. That also is a significant exercise, and actually the amount that we have to pay for it is pretty economic. I hope they're not listening, but it's not a huge amount for the work that they do.
Thank you, Director Byrne. Will this health insurance actuarial contract, or do you anticipate it being a recurring service that they provide?
Yes, Senator, they're both recurring services. One, because we have to review the health insurance contract every year, and the other one because GASB rules require us to recalculate the present value every year.
Thank you. Mr. Director, I really appreciate that DOA has provided us with an extensive list of its many goals and objectives for FY2020 in your budget requests, and I just wanted to focus on a few of them to see where we are with some of these objectives. So in your HR division, you listed, and I quote, implementing an online job application submission web-based app as an objective. Could you provide the committee with an update on this endeavor?
Yes, I'm going to ask the deputy to respond.
So this is for last year. I just wanted to see if there was progress on it. It was an online job application submission web-based app.
Oh, we're in the test. Sorry, Senator. We're still in the testing mode, and we have not yet quite sent it out to the department. So we're trying to just work that within the Department of Administration. And once that does go through, then it will be also shared to all the other agencies.
And are you working with the Office of Technology to get this up and running? Have they been helpful for you in this process?
Actually, we do have a contractor that's helping us in that effort. So not to say that we will not be working with OTEC, but currently we do have a subcontractor that works on this particular software.
Okay, you might have covered this in the very beginning and I might have missed it, but I just wanted to follow up on the status of recruitment for a few of these positions. So Chief Financial Manager, Accountant 3, Accountant 1, Management Analyst, and Treasury Cashier.
Okay.
I believe those are vacant positions, so I just wanted to see if those are in process, you're attempting to hire. What's the status of the recruitment for those?
Okay, we currently do have the GG1s already with the with our division, so they're being processed. They'll put out for an announcement. We do have a treasury cashier that was just vacated a couple of weeks ago, and that also we are waiting for the GG1 to return from BBMR. The assistant What's the other one? I'm sorry.
So it was Chief Financial Manager, Accountant 3, Accountant 2, Management Analyst, and Treasury Cashier.
Okay, accountant 3, that could be just for a promotion, not necessarily a recruitment.
I see.
And we want to afford opportunities for our staff also to
In-house to
yeah.
move up. Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense. Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of other questions about overtime funding and AS 400 replacement, but I'll just allow everybody else to go through. But I do have one last question about bereavement leave. So last year, our office received a lot of calls from constituents who had been told that GovGuam employees have been denied paid bereavement leave under DOA's personnel rules and regulations. This was due in part to an interpretation of the Public Law 34-40, which established job-protected bereavement leave for Guam families under Guam FMLA. So now that we've clarified 34-40 in the last budget act, and I worked with Director Byrne to be able to do this, I wanted to just check in with you and see if you're still receiving concerns regarding the bereavement policy, and if there are any plans for DOA to update and amend its personnel rules and regulations in this regard.
Yes, Senator, we don't have any problems ever since that law was in effect. We do inform the agencies that the bereavement has been, actually, it has never, should have never been taken away from the employees.
Great.
I think that was just a misinterpretation on some of the, from my understanding from our HR before, and I made it clear that that is not one that should have been taken away. So, no, it is currently in place.
I certainly appreciate that. That was never the intention of the body to have that kind of discrepancy included between private sector and public sector employees. So I'm glad that we're able to rectify that. And I thank you very much for your assistance with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Telo, ma'am, do you have any questions?
Sujus Masi, Mr. Chair, and good morning to you, Ed and Edith. Thank you so much for being here and providing us some documents so that we can follow along and some information. It's very helpful when we're going through these budgets to see it. And, you know, I was a couple of questions, well, actually more than a couple of questions, but has there been any adjustment to your budget since you submitted it in February? Have you made any adjustments since?
No, we haven't, Senator.
So you're staying status quo?
Yes.
In the section of special funds of indirect costs, this indirect cost basically is, you know, overseeing grants and federal funding. And that being said, well, if it says just grants, federal funding, I don't know, it could be two different things, you know, grants and then, you know, federal funding. So the CARES Act being federal funding, it goes to DOE. There's like $41 million, if I'm not mistaken, is going to DOE. Is any of that money or funding going to be set aside for DOE or BBMR to do the job of an indirect cost, which is to oversee the movement of these federal funds?
Senator, thank you. The 41 million that's going to DOE is DOE's money. It may pass through DOA, but it's specific to DOE, and I think it's kind of specific to distance learning and making sure that they provide whatever equipment and facilities are needed to facilitate distance learning.
Okay, so nothing in the CARES Act you'll be receiving for any administrative or financial work done by DOA for any of these?
Well, let me, if I may, continue down that path.
Sure, thank you.
The indirect cost fund is an allocation of federal money that's made across various agencies, as you say, to support the federal funding effort. In our case, most of it is either accounting that it does deal with drawdowns of federal funds, or payroll that pays federally funded employees. And about a third of our workforce in the allied agencies are federally funded employees. So those two activities are the bulk of why we got money from the indirect cost fund.
Right. Right, and I'm sure that some of the CARES Act funding, which is federal funding, is going to be utilized in that same kind of scenario. So my question was if the administration will be receiving any direct funds. I know that you have a lesser amount from last year's request in your budget. You're looking at, it's not that much, but $16,000 is less than you anticipate for FY2021 versus, prior year. But with all these federal funding money coming in, I'm questioning that with regards to that.
Yes, thank you. The amount that we have in the fiscal 2021 budget is an amount that's notified to us by BBMR that makes the allocation of the indirect cost fund based upon the availability and the activity, and the activity is what I described earlier. The CARES Act funding isn't germane to the indirect cost fund because
Okay.
this amount is determined and was determined before the CARES Act funding was made available.
Okay.
There is the opportunity within the rules for the CARES Act funding, and I have to say the rules frequently change, and it's quite a task to keep up with them, but there is the ability to use some of that for administration, and we intend to do so where appropriate.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that one word that you said, not being germane, to the indirect cost is sufficient enough. It explains it. So, but then again, you will be receiving some kind of money with regards to that. So, Ed, many times we brought you before us in Committee of the Whole to try and get some questions answered, and so I'm just going to go down through, and I think this is relevant because we need to see how much money that the administration has or what accounts that you have the funding for. So my first question is on the war claims reimbursement. How much has the government of Guam been paid in advance for war claims?
In advance?
Yes, or not in advance, advance war claims. So how much have you received from the Treasury, the United States Treasury?
At the moment, we've received about 12.2 million.
12 point, okay. And that funding went where? What account did that funding go into?
It went back into the war claims funding, and I think, as I mentioned before, it was used to pay tax refunds.
Okay, and are you aware that that money needs to be appropriated in order to come out? Other than paying war claims, I that account says that it needs an appropriation in order to pay for anything. So you paid tax refunds with that. Actually, it doesn't say that in the war claims account to allow you to pay anything from that account for war claims. I mean, for tax refunds, but just for war claims.
As we mentioned before, the tax refunds are already appropriated, so we considered that was the appropriation to pay the tax refunds.
Okay, let me get this straight. You just said that you figured that there was an appropriation for tax refunds, so you dipped into the war claims to pay it, which you believe is justified in order to use that money in the war claims.
I think nobody wants us not to pay tax refunds, and
that's not the point, Mr. Byrne. Everybody wants tax refunds. We've all been fighting for it, but paying it correctly is a different story. Now, you're saying that you're justifying taking out of the war claims to pay tax refunds without any appropriation from the legislature to allow you to take from that account.
Senator, are you saying that it wasn't paid correctly?
Say again, please?
Are you saying that you think that it wasn't paid correctly?
I'm asking you, where do you get the authority to use money out of the war claims when it clearly says that it has to be appropriated? Any kind of spending other than paying war claims?
And I think, Senator, I said it has been appropriated.
I'm sorry?
I think I said that it has been appropriated.
And where did that appropriation, what law, what bill that passed that allowed that?
In the budget law.
In the budget?
Yeah, in the budget law that was passed into legislation.
To take out of the word, okay, you know what? I don't believe that, but you know, I'm not going to sit here and continue to argue. I'm going to continue to go on. At least you're giving me your answers, and I appreciate it. Going into 2019 excess revenue, what is the latest information available regarding excess revenue for 2019 revenues? What is the latest information available regarding excess revenue, excess FY 2019 revenues? The audit status, what is the status?
The status of the audit?
Yes.
Yeah. The audit is almost complete.
I'm sorry?
The audit is almost complete.
It's still almost complete. We're in July.
Yes.
Almost the end of July, and still the audit hasn't been done. Do you know why there's such a delay in something like that?
Yes, Senator, I do. There is one component unit which have not submitted their financial statements. And as you know, each of the component units are included in the financial statements. We cannot issue it without that particular unit, without us having the auditors consider putting in an adverse opinion in the financial statements.
Is there
Therefore,
anything
I
in
do
law
not
that
want-
requires the agencies to provide this information in a timely manner?
Can I just finish? So I don't want to issue the financial statements when a little bit of work needs to be done in order to make sure that we have an unmodified opinion. To my mind, it's very important to have an unmodified opinion. When I'm speaking with rating agencies and making sure that our ratings are appropriately reflecting our financial strength, to have an opinion that is not unmodified would make that very difficult. Sorry, but you had a second question that I didn't quite hear.
Yes, is there anything in law or anything required by DOA to provide this information in a timely manner? Because it's obvious you got one agency that's holding up this whole audit that, you know, I don't know if it's an excuse that they're using just to keep delaying this and delaying this, to find out the true amount of the excess revenue in FY 2019 and to find out where you've been spending it.
There's no law at present.
Okay, I think that's something that needs to be done, right? So we can get these audits done.
Yes, you know, that's something that we could look at. But I would say, of course, in defense of everybody involved in this, and some people are working pretty hard to make sure we get through this, that, you know, the government had a shutdown, and some agencies were literally shut down. As I mentioned, DOA wasn't, and that's why we've been able to get to the point where we are just waiting for this one agency. A lot of the other agencies did report on time or late because of the government shutdown. And I think we all have to understand that these are exceptional circumstances. I believe that some of the other territories are experiencing the same delays. So you may be sure, though, that we're all working very hard, and we're working with the external auditors and OPA to make sure that we get these financial statements out as soon as possible. It's to all our advantage.
Thank you, Mr. Burns, for that. And I realize, you know, there was a shutdown. I believe we had a pandemic, but we also heard from this administration that individuals, even though the government of Guam employees, they were still getting paid, but they were working from home. They were able to utilize resources from home and continue to work, which was admirable. I mean, I know that senators, we didn't stop during this whole pandemic. We received calls. We did everything we could, pumped out information to do our part as well. And I know that the government and Guam employees who didn't have to be physically in the office, So when you're doing audits and you're putting documents together, I mean, most of that is on like hard drive or information you can get easily through what's already in data. So the excuse of not providing information like that, I don't buy that at all. And this delay of this excess revenue is just way too long. You know, and I hope, Mr. Burns, that you just keep following up with that every day, because we need to know. We're going to be in a budget situation here that it seems the administration doesn't think there's an issue with. I mean, there might not be right now, because we're getting over $1 billion of stimulus money that generates almost $100 million in taxes for the government of Guam. And then that funding, okay, is going to end soon, and then we're going 2021. So we need to take some austere measures now in order to prepare for 2021. Anyways, I'm sorry to ramble on about that, but I think just not being concerned about the budget is a big issue, and everyone seems to be nonchalant until the time comes when they're paid less paydays.
I can assure you, Senator, I'm as keen as you are to get these financial statements out, because we have to start working. You know, we're getting towards the end of fiscal 20, and we have to start the cycle all over again. So certainly, speaking for myself, I really want these financial statements out.
Sure, I know you do, Mr. Byrne. I'm very on top of things most of the time. So with the COVID stimulus checks that went out, there was a letter that was sent out after the stimulus checks were sent out, and these notification letters were signed by Adelup. The mailing of this, you know, so about $33,000 or $36,000 was the number I heard to mail out these. I mean, I was kind of wondering why the checks and the letter explaining the checks didn't go together. I guess it was an afterthought or something went down. But did DOA have to fork out this funding to mail out these letters?
That actually is the responsibility of DRT. I
Of revenue
believe
tax?
DRT actually bore the funding for those letters.
Okay, so DOA did not have to pay for the mailing
no.
or the letters or anything like that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to reserve the opportunity to come back in case I have some additional questions.
Thank you, Senator
you.
Taitigui. Senator Moylan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director, Deputy. Thank you also for allowing us or giving us your slide presentations. Just want to refer to divisions of accounts on your challenging task. Item number 5, where the computer systems for DOA and DRT must interface with each other to allow for the real-time monies and collection of revenue. When you're referring to the computer systems that you're able to utilize, I believe it's CARES money, is this one of the systems that will help you with this?
Yes, Senator. It's just one of the aspects that we're looking at in looking at the whole financial management system. But it is something that actually takes a lot of time, the reconciliation between the two systems.
The real-time money ideas is important for DOA to what we can spend right away, right? Instead of waiting, you know, like if it was my personal checking account, I had to wait so many days before that check gets deposited into my account. So I have really no idea, but the real time is quite helpful for you. And then I also recall we had a conversation about utilizing credit cards at Department of Revenue and Taxation, and you were very helpful in responding to that. But my concern was, of course, the cost for the customers and trying to put that aside for now, and then it also would help for general fund to get that money in there quicker by a swipe of the card without any cost to the customer. So the real time is there for the money comes quicker then, and then also the part where you get checks that may not go through and the administrative requirements by DRT to follow up and charge the delinquent fee or those other fees involved. You responded also to my request, but can you please just explain your position on that and the cost involved?
Yes, Senator, thank you. As you mentioned, quick realization of funds is really important. We, under the previous system, the taxpayer had to pay the processing fees, basically, if they wished to pay by credit card. And I think that was that provision was introduced because people at that time, senators and administration, was concerned about the cost of that the general fund bore for processing those payments. However, when we came to looking at how we should respond to the public health emergency, there were two aspects that really brought us to a decision to have the government bear these fees, at least for the duration of the public health emergency. One was the ability to collect these funds without people having to endanger themselves by coming to a government facility and writing or maybe presenting a check or whatever, or even just a credit card, because they could do that at the facility. But that was deemed to be a possible danger, both to the members of the public and indeed to the staff members who were on the receiving end of it. But we were also keen to bring in funds, as you said. And so when we spoke with DRT, we both agreed that it would be to the advantage of both DOA and DRT to adopt this new process and bring in funds early and quicker and easily. And when you present a credit card and the funds aren't available, we know immediately, rather than having a check bounce or some other activity making it difficult to follow the process. By and large, I have to say that I think it's worked. We have brought in funds regularly throughout this public health emergency. Treasury of Guam was open for the most part during the government shutdown, but DRT wasn't. And we have kept up the flow of funds, and that's the reason that we've been able to pay all these allotments that we spoke about earlier, and pay for our liabilities as they arise, and not have the funds of the government stressed.
Thank you, Director. Also on your slides, under Division of Human Resources, Manning Employee Relations, number 4, it discusses the challenging task of recruitment. Earlier this year, with our public safety recruitment and the shortfalls, we understood that we have difficulty in recruitment for law enforcement or peace officers, Peace Officer 1 specifically. And the recruitment had to deal with a couple of factors, and after talking with the director, it also involved the education of those that are applying and taking the post-requirement test. But there were also other measures on the selection process and the getting the applications and the listing to public safety agencies like Department of Corrections and Guam Police Department. Earlier, or back in September, we introduced a measure called SWIFT Appointment Modernization Act. And that was just to help expedite for public safety recruitment so we can fill these vacancies. This is all pre-COVID as well. So I know we have our situation now with COVID and all, but have we been able to expedite the process for recruitment of peace officers for our public safety departments?
I'm sorry, Mr. Senator, we know that We know that, yes, we had challenges, and I know for a fact that it was also due to post requirements, but we are working actually with them. We do have monthly meetings with them, but it's a requirement from the post, so it's also for them to make that changes. We at DOA are not able to make that change without the post. That's how they also came out with their 40% increase when that went into effect. So all of that was as part of the post requirements. But we continue to process. As a matter of fact, we will be also launching back the testing for those employees that are, we do have continuous announcements for fire, GPD, and DOC. Those are departments that are always looking for more applicants, and customs, by the way. But it also requires funding to hire. So to my knowledge, we have been doing well for DOC. GPD, we also are giving them the names as they do pass all the necessary criteria, which is the examinations, both the written and the physical. So we're doing pretty well, especially after this pandemic that we still have to deal with, but we are doing our best to ensure that these departments are still given the necessary staffing that they need.
Okay, thank you. Also on your slide regarding general service agencies, item number 4, building warehouse facility is in dire need of major repairs. You know, when I opened my senatorial office, we got rid of a lot of inherited stuff, old computers, just like DOA, things, even floppy disk computers. You probably have some in your office too. But going down to GSA to dispose of it, and I had the opportunity to walk through the warehouse. I'm sure there's buckets that they catch from their 2-story warehouse in there, but I also noticed the tons of storage of document files to the ceiling, which is probably leaking as well. And then the condition of that building was just really sad. There's only so many sections that they can really work in. It's like the next major storm, it looks like it's just going to tip over. And that could have been, you know, it reminds me of, you know, when the military was here and liberation and building Quonset huts. It looks that old. And I'm surprised how it's still standing. But I think it really got to get rid of all that clutter inside. And when you mentioned that these agencies continue to store documents and files but have no prepared documents to say when you can dispose of these records, I can see that's where a problem for GSA, because how can you just throw away a box full of documents from, and these documents are from all these different agencies, but there's no more room. So what is being done for these agencies to say, hey, you know, you got till 30 days to give me your disposal requirements, otherwise we're just going to burn it all or shred it all or something, because it's at a point, I think, where it's really breaking at the seams. And plus that building is just leaking galore. And you should ask us how we can help you build something else, or what is the plans for that place to move at a better location. If you can enlighten or provide more information, please.
Yes, Senator, thank you. Well, you're right. It's not a pretty sight when you go down and look at all those documents. That's one of the reasons why we're interested, and it's a stated goal of the agency to go paperless so that we don't make it any worse. Right? And indeed, we've had several discussions within the agency of not creating any more paper, but as soon as we finish with it, we're going to scan it and store it electronically. The documents down at GSA are of various ages. Right? Some of them go back to even before the turn of the century. But you're right, they belong to the individual departments. So we do have plans for not being quite as if I may say, quite as aggressive as you're suggesting, but we are going to tell the agency, especially if there's already a destruction date on the box, and many of them do have a destruction date on the box, that we're going to destroy the contents within a reasonable period of time. Some of that issue is tied up with legislative approvals that we have to get from the Attorney General. So we're working through all those processes to try and make sure that we can reduce the number to a reasonable state, especially since, some of those, you're correct, they're in such a state that retrieval is very difficult, even if you did have a need to retrieve them. So we're working through that. When we clear out, and that those are stored in the middle of the warehouse there, when we clear that out, we're going to look at the actual cladding of the warehouse, which seems to be the problem, because there's nothing wrong with the concrete floor. I think that the support structures are okay. It's mainly the cladding. It may not be such a huge task to repair the shell of the building. And some parts of the building also rather badly need air conditioning, because if you are going to store documents, it doesn't help to store them in a humid atmosphere. So yes, thank you. We are looking at all that. It hasn't been a priority over the last few weeks because we've had so many other activities going on, but I assure you we're going to look at it.
Thank you, Director. And then on the last page of your presentation on the FY21 budget, the last column, FY2021, a request for money. I'm just wondering if I understood you correctly. You said it's in line with the projections. Is that what you mean? Can you explain?
Yes, the projections for this year show that we're going to spend just under 90 million, and the forecast for next year is almost 87.5 million. So it's not too far away.
Okay, thank you, Director. And just on my final question here, regarding the rainy day fund, can you let us know information about the money that was used for the rainy day fund, how it was used, and the expenditures, basically, and the balance, please, regarding the rainy day fund?
Yes, Senator. The rainy day fund was an appropriation from the general fund. So when the later legislation came out to release it, effectively it goes back into the general fund.
Your balance, please?
The balance?
Yes, Director.
We had about, when we got to that stopping point, we had about 4.5 million in the fund.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kelly Mars Saitano, ma'am, and followed by Senator Teresa Lai, then Senator Mary Torres.
Situus Maasi, Mr. Chair, and Situus Maasi to both of you for being here and walking us through your information. It was very helpful to have the information laid out in the way that it did, for you to line out the organization, the essential functions, and the challenges so that we know what you are trying to address. That's very important for us in weighing out your budget. And it's good to know, as you were informing us, that you're working to streamline, update, and go paperless. That is, of course, environmentally friendly, and we're hoping that it's going to be a cost savings in the long run, although there may be some initial upfront costs. And I just wanted to mention, it's perhaps something you're well aware of, but with those documents that we were just speaking of, there have been efforts in the past through MARC, through the Guam Preservation Trust, and through our new archives, where they receive grants, they give grants, so that one can look through those documents and get them scanned so that they are part of the government record, held at MARC, held at our archives, or whatever. And so there may be some possibilities in partnering with them to address some of that, to maybe take some of that burden solely off your shoulders and then create a partnership. And I just wanted to look at, with each branch catching up with their work. Like we've basically heard across the board, as you were just saying, that different agencies have been out there working and doing extra functions, or they were in various stages of lockdown, and the pandemic, of course, has hit all of us. We see branches like the judicial branch that is very, very diligent and is working so hard for the community that they are really working through this kind of overload in a sense. And so we really appreciate everybody's diligence, and we definitely understand that there's a lot of catching up for all of us to do. With that, it seems that all of these federal monies that are coming in, which we're extremely appreciative of, it's going to help us out immensely. But I just wanted some indication about how much additional work you would say that is placing on DOA for this upcoming year, like for right now, but also for this upcoming year, and where you are in feeling like you're caught up, maybe even letting us understand if you had to put in new SOPs. I know my office did as we worked remotely. It wasn't just, hey, you're at home, tackle your laptop. We had to come up with a whole new set of SOPs. So if you could walk us through a few things like that to help us understand your upcoming year.
Yes, Senator, thank you. Thank you. The DOA has had to deal with a lot of additional tasks during the recent public health emergency. As I mentioned, my estimate is that the throughput of actual funding is going to be likely double what it was last year. But it's a little bit deeper than that. You know, we've had, even despite the efforts of other agencies, I think you know that DOA has been responsible for a good deal of the payments that go out under the Programmam Salapi. We've paid out about $14 million, and all that work was basically done. Once we got the basic information from public health, all that work was done by DOA. Why? Because it had to be done. So the staff there really stepped up, and in my opening remarks, I wanted to pay tribute to the hard work that is being done by staff that is above and beyond their normal duties. As for going forward, we really don't know what further federal funds are going to be made available to us. The CARES Act funding expires under present legislation on December 30th, and in order to use it, we actually have to incur the cost. And this is a new definition. I mentioned earlier that we were getting revised definitions from US Treasury all the time. This is a new definition that came through because many of the state controllers were uncertain exactly what it meant. So we've got some definition on that. I know there are measures in Congress to either extend or expand federal funding. I don't know that any of us knows exactly what form it'll take if and when it does appear. Obviously, any federal funding we get is helpful. One of the things that we have been able to do, I think, and it's one of the stated goals of the administration, is to maximize the amount of regular federal funding that we're able to get into the system and use. That certainly helped both before the public health emergency was declared and indeed afterwards, because we've been able to use the availability of that federal funding to do some things that it would have been very difficult had we not had that funding. It's very difficult to predict exactly what tasks are going to be ahead of us. I know that the big agencies that are involved, which are public health, GPD and GFD, don't really know either. But we hope, obviously, that the public health emergency and the measures that have been taken to date make sure that in the coming months that we have less of an effect, and that obviously we want to make sure that fewer or no people are infected. The efforts that we've made in the past, I think, will bear fruit in the future. We've certainly learned some lessons along the way in how to maximize the throughput. And one of the lessons that we've learned is obviously we need a more resilient system, accounting system, and that will include HR and purchasing, a more resilient accounting system that doesn't have some of the difficulties that we have now. It's nobody's, it's nobody's fault. It's just it's a 30-year-old system that never had to deal with this particular circumstance. So we just need to move on and do what we can to modernize our way of accounting.
Situus Masi for walking us through some of that. There is a question that I've been wondering, and hopefully DOA can shed some light on this. So you had mentioned that for these federal monies, the CARES Act at least specifically, that the costs have to be incurred first. And so it's caused me to wonder if there's some inability for some agencies or government entities to be able to incur this cost upfront. So is that something that DOA is able to help level out for everybody and make sure that if they have a need, even if maybe there's a challenge in their budget to pay it up front, that their needs can be met? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, and could I just clarify what you said? The CARES Act money we've already got, but what the kicker in the whole thing is that we have to incur the cost in order to avoid giving it back. And so that's what we're engaged on. Every time that we get requests from agencies, I've certainly made it a practice to make sure that if it's appropriate to use CARES Act money, and that it's within the budget that's, as I say, had already been submitted to the legislature, that money is used. We don't want to give it back. We have good use for that money, and all agencies are aware of it, and all agencies are aware of the amount that's budgeted for them. So it's a continuing dialogue. I think if you ask my staff, I'm always asking them, why did you put that money there? Would this not be a better place to put it? But we also want to bear in mind that there's other federal funding that might expire that we also want to use. So it's a balancing act. But we're very well aware of it, and we're working on it all the time.
Situus Maasi, I mean, I, along with the other senators here, of course, the Mr. Chairman up here, we want to be able to leverage every penny we can that's coming our way to assist our community and make sure that they get as much of their services as possible. Forgive me if I missed this, but I just want to understand, when you were talking about staffing patterns and vacancies, you might have mentioned that perhaps some of them are retiring. Are there any staff that are retiring within DOA this upcoming year that you're aware of? Have you done that analysis?
Senator, if I may, yes, we do have, but they have not necessarily have come forward. We can almost say that there's like probably maybe 6. Some of those employees are beyond 40 years in the government, but for whatever reason, they're still with us. but none has come forward. We only lost 2 so far through retirement. Otherwise, that was all that we had pretty much for DOA.
Sutuus Masi, and it seems like a fairly manageable number, but perhaps it's the position. Are there any positions that we should be concerned about just to make sure that we're staying on top of it? Any upper level maybe positions?
Actually, our staffing is pretty well covered. We just have vacancies that we need to fill. GG1s are being processed, and we'll go through the process of course, the announcement, the ratings, and then the interview. So that is where we are with our own vacancies right now.
Okay, and we talked about allotments a little bit. With the allotments, you were saying that you had really made some progress in making sure that they were getting out regularly. That's so important because we had heard quite a few testimonies prior to this year about the struggles that entities had had before and then ended up being short at the end by $6 million or more, and it had really put them in some crisis modes. So going forward, with just kind of the unsure landscape before us, do you foresee any allotment issues? And if there are going to be ebbs and flows with our monies coming in, like we've had this deferment of our income tax payments, do you have SOPs in place, or do you have strategies in place to help ease and make sure that allotments continue to be regular?
Yes, Senator, we look at our cash every day. We look at what comes in and we look at what goes out. As you mentioned, I hope, well, I didn't mention, but I hope that the comments that you're getting have tailed off, because everybody is getting their allotment. And indeed, at the end of last year, everybody got their full allotment too. We're well aware of the need for these agencies that do rely upon the general fund to have their cash regularly. We expect them to budget as well as we budget, and we rely upon them to be able to do that and to use the money wisely when it actually arrives at their agency. So as we speak today, I'm with the circumstances as we know them today, I'm happy that we can continue to pay out those allotments regularly and on time.
Well, definitely we hope that they're able to be paid in the manner that they have been, because of course, as you said, it's such a difficulty and a challenge if there are disruptions, and so we'll all continue to look at the landscape.
We've also made sure that I think almost everyone now is paid by EFT too. So we don't have paper checks flying around and people standing waiting for checks. We make these EFT payments on the due date, and those agencies, I think, know where to look for the funds when they arrive.
Do you have any other questions, Senator Kelly?
Yes. With the agencies, you mentioned that there's a lot of federal funding that comes in normally, and then of course we're having additional funding. Do you have something in place that guarantees that each of these entities are requesting that $200,000 waiver for federal match requirements to ensure that if it's applicable, it is being applied? I mean, is that part of your analysis of what you do?
The management of federal grants is done by the State Clearinghouse. I know they have lots of procedures in place, and indeed I know they're always talking to agencies that can get federal funding, how to apply, how to optimize their applications. So that part of the process is outside DOA. Our activity is to make sure that as soon as a grant or funding becomes available, we apply for it, we draw it down, it comes through the federal payment system, and it gets into the right place for the agency to use it.
Sujus Masi for all of your answers today and to the chair. And I'd also like to request that if there's a follow-up question, I could ask it at later time. Sujus Masi.
All right, thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Teresa Lai, followed by Senator Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hafa Mr. Byrne, Mrs. Pangilinan. Thank you for all your work during this health emergency, and I know that it doesn't end. It continues because of the special circumstances we've been put under, but thank you. If I could just start off with the CARES funding, you had been budgeted to receive $6 million from that $117 million, and of course $3.5 million for the payment of the credit card fees. But the $6 million shows that it was for, well, part of it, $30,000 was for 12 desktop computers, $2,500 each. And how is the rest of the $6 million spent, may I ask, just quickly?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Senator, it's bookmarked so that we can both investigate and acquire a new financial management system. Because of the reasons I spoke about earlier, is that we're dealing with an old system. This particular emergency, it's kind of bursting at the seams.
Sure.
And we want to make sure that we have a modern, efficient system that reduces costs in the long term.
All right. Okay, so then you also put that the FMIS in your budget presentation for, that's what I was going to ask. So your equipment request seems to have increased by about $52,000. So is that, I wanted to ask, what's the difference? Is that for the FMIS and the outdated computer workstations from our general funds, or is that going to be from the CARES fund?
The $52,000 is for hardware within the department, workstations, printers, because printers have a life that doesn't last forever, especially if you're putting through a whole lot of thick checks through the system. We at the moment we print out checks on a line dot matrix printer, which the last time I saw was like 15 years ago. Right? So we need to modernize our local hardware. I was actually quite surprised on Friday when we had a survey of the software, like it was actually Microsoft Word, and which versions people were using within the department. And some of our employees were still using Word 2003. So we need funding to acquire the more up-to-date Word applications and Excel applications and Access applications in order to do some of the tasks that we really need to do efficiently, and we can transfer, because if you're using an old version of Word and you're sending that to someone that has a new version, it tends to get out of format.
Sure. All right, I just wanted to clarify, and if you could just, how much, you've requested CARES Act funding for desktop computers and now for financial management system, but you've also put that in your budget. So you're using both budget and CARES money for equipment and software?
Yes, we are. The original budget was done, obviously, before the CARES Act. Then when the CARES Act came in and we saw a need to do more, we put it into the CARES Act funding.
All right. Do you expect that you will not be able to incur this cost before December?
No.
You're working hard.
Thank you for asking. But that would be the last thing that I would want to do. It's very important to us that we do. We're working on it as fast as we can. And we certainly intend to do that. It's so important to the department and the government.
All right. Do you expect any lapses for FY20?
From DOA?
Yes.
No.
Unpaid vendors?
Unpaid vendors. Well, there's always unpaid vendors because if we're paying in 45 days, which we are currently, obviously we've got invoices coming in that we can't pay before the year end. But I don't expect an increase in the amount of accounts payable, no.
All right. You also take care of the payroll, I think, for a lot of the other
yes,
agencies. And I just wanted to check because we know that Guam Memorial Hospital had got caught with this huge amount of withholding taxes that had not been paid. And I don't know, I was surprised by that. And so now they've tried to catch up, and I think they had a plan that would be all paid up. But do we have at risk any other incident like that you are aware of in any of the agencies?
Well, as for the line agencies that we pay, we just pay the withholding as it's incurred. So we don't have a backlog. I don't know if there are any other autonomous agencies. I'd be surprised if there were, but I don't know of any.
All right. What about unpaid retirement contributions?
No, we don't have any. Occasionally we get somebody for one reason or other had some particular circumstance that it wasn't paid, but it's like I think last year we had about a dozen people. But our regular payments are made regularly within our cash flow.
All right. I appreciate that because not too long ago when we've heard a lot of stories about this type of unpaid obligations. All right. What about, okay, so we talked about the Government of Guam 2019 audits not completed yet. You're waiting for one agency. Which agency was that was not responding?
We're waiting for GURA.
GURA. And do you, from what you know so far, do you still expect a surplus for FY19?
So far as I know, yes.
Do you have an estimated amount?
I really hope that you can wait the few days. I know it's dependent upon this agency, but it really would be. I could ask you to wait a few days, and it will be made available. It's very hard for us to take little bits out of the audit and not contravene some regulations.
When do you expect it? When do you expect it to be published?
The last estimate I had from their auditors, and I think they're working feverishly to get that, was 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
3 weeks, yeah.
Is there any way you can change that, Mr. Byrne? Because
yes.
we're trying to do a budget here and yeah.
Yes, we're working with the agency, with the public auditor, and as I think I mentioned earlier, and the auditors to try and make it. As I say, I don't like the idea it's going to take so long because we can't move on. We can't, we have to carry forward balances into the current year. So it's certainly not my wish to have it go on any longer, any day longer than we need.
All right. Can you tell us the amount of outstanding obligations from the FY 2018 audit that were paid during FY19? In other words, was that amount reduced?
Yes, but I can't. It's part of the audit, so you'll see when you get the audit numbers how much it was reduced.
All right. Again, I just want to stress, I hope we can get that as soon as possible, hopefully within a week, because, if we're going to move forward with our own
Yeah, I understand.
2020. All right.
I will understand.
Your budget, this spreadsheet that you gave us shows that your 2020 appropriation was about 90 million, and your 2020 forecast is 89 million. It shows, I guess, only a $1 million impact then from COVID is what you're expecting. Is this is this realistic? Your actuals are 75 million. I'm talking about the last page of your PowerPoint.
Yes. Yes. There are certain things we need to look at during the, and I hope we will during the course of the when we get to the budget thing, like the retiree health contribution, where we've always been low, and the reason that we've always been low is that the number that came from the retirement fund omitted the DC retirees that we still have to pay for. So there's some things we have to do when we come to the final numbers to get that right, and that accounts for much of the difference that you're looking at.
All right, and then does this forecast of only $1 million shortfall for 2020, it's surprising to me. Does that include a projection of expenditure of CARES money, I guess?
It's the best we can. You know, we obviously can't spend more than the appropriations, so where we get to an appropriation ceiling, like on the streetlights, where we've got to an appropriation ceiling, we haven't been we don't overspend, and that's the reason why it's capped. You know, the actual is being capped to the appropriation.
Yes. All right. For the general fund, you're predicting that you've appropriated for FY20 $6.8 million, and you're predicting to receive $6.9 million, meaning, in effect, no effect from the pandemic on the general fund.
No, that's our forecast. Sorry, that's our forecast of cost.
Forecast of expenditures?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I read that wrong then.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. That's better. All right. Do you the income tax deadline just passed last week? Are you able to tell us whether what was received is what we should have received in April? I mean, are they similar amounts or are we below?
My impression is that because the deadline was kind of drawn out, during the period between April and July, we continued to receive little bits, because I think people found it's partly because of the ability to pay by credit card. People found it better to draw it out rather than pay it all in one go. We did get something like, 12 million in one day on the final day. But that's not yet a final figure because my staff are still, that was only a few days ago, and my staff are still totaling it. But actually, I think if you look over the receipts for the last few weeks, people have been kind of building up to paying out their final amount.
All right. I guess, yeah, I want to get a gist of whether you think income taxes revenue is going to be up to what we projected in the beginning of 2020.
For 2020?
Yes.
Well, that's something that's going to come out in the CRER.
Right.
The one that you're about to receive today is up to the end of June. It doesn't include the July numbers. I think we're confident that the July numbers will make up for a large part of the deficit.
All right. That's why I'm asking, because you've said that at another hearing also, that
Yes.
wait until July when these income tax payments are due, and then we'll know for sure kind of where we are. All right.
Yeah.
So that won't be reported until August 20?
Yes, Senator.
All right. I guess I'm just going to ask if you get that earlier, you could give us a hint, because August 20, our budget is supposed to be completed here at the legislature by the end of August.
Yes. All right. I'll speak with Lester Carlson at BBMR about that. Yeah.
Thank you. You estimated last September that the FY 2020 health insurance would cost $108 million approximately. How close are we to that estimate for FY 20?
Well, that's a pretty good estimate for 2020. Yeah.
All right. And health insurance negotiations for 21 what amount was put into the government budget request for that, for health insurance?
I think it was roughly the same amount.
108 million?
108 or 109. But as you know, the cost is spread out over employee benefits and in retirees and everywhere else.
Right. That's why I'm asking, because we can't find that ourselves. It's spread out among all the agencies' benefits.
And I should emphasize that that amount includes the employee contributions too. The 108 is the total policy cost, including employee contributions.
Oh. All right. And so the negotiations are completed now for FY21.
Yeah,
Do we need to make an adjustment to these budgets based on that?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be close enough, but that's something that I'm talking to BBMR about, and it's the negotiations are, as I say, almost complete, but we're actually just trying to get a final number as we speak.
So for now, you're saying no need to adjust the budget requests?
With the exception, as I mentioned earlier, of the retiree health, cost, where there was a little bit missing.
All right. For FY20?
For FY20 and 21.
And 21, okay. All right. The tax refunds, are the deposits that are being made to this income tax refund efficient payment trust fund equal to the amount that's required by the statute?
No, it never has been. I think I've responded to you previously about that. Because basically the fund has never been funded, we're effectively paying it as we're going along. But we've made a lot of we've made a lot of progress in paying these refunds out timely, and we've paid out. I think we've paid out everything for last year, and we're well in. I think the last payment that came out from DRT was for tax returns filed almost at the end of January.
January 30th,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Right. But at this time last year, or in 2018, you were already paying refunds filed through February 12th.
Yes, yes. But of course, we also had our big receipt in April that we didn't have this year. I'm sure, as you mentioned before, when you were talking about the payments, we will catch up and we will pay out those refunds.
Now that you've received income taxes in July.
Then we get the income taxes in, right? Yeah.
All right. When we were talking about the War Claims Fund and that you had used that, it was supposed to be a restricted lockbox special fund subject to legislative appropriation, but you said you've used it for to pay tax refunds. And I want to ask, we've heard this before for special funds such as the E91 fund, the land survey and revolving fund, where money was taken out of the special fund. We didn't know about it till afterward, and pretty much, except for the E911, not reimbursed to these special funds. They were written off and said not likely to be paid was something, I guess that was indicated at a prior public hearing. Are there any other special funds that are being used kind of contrary to their statutory authority at this point?
No, Senator. In actual fact, many of the special funds owe money to the general fund because the general fund effectively pays it out first. As you know, we under an order from the PUC, we made the payment actually last year.
E911, yes.
Like 14 months ago, right? We made the payment to the 911 fund. And during the course of fiscal 2020, the situation is reversed, and there are special funds that owe money to the general fund.
All right. Well, are there any at risk of you taking those funds?
Is there any, sorry?
Are there any of those special funds that are at risk of not being reimbursed what they're owed?
No, it's the other way around.
I know there are
They
some-
have to reimburse the general fund.
All right, there are some that owe you right now.
Right. As you know, and I think this came up in the prior hearing too, there are funds that are at risk, like the Customs and Quarantine Fund,
Right.
because there are no arrivals to fund that fund. But BBMR are looking at that and to make sure that we can fund all the requirements of Customs and Quarantine.
Okay, so we're not going to see any that were, the money was taken and not going to be reimbursed for this year?
Correct.
All right. Except for this War Claims Fund. What, are you processing any war claims?
No, we've turned it over to the U.S. Treasury.
All right, I've
to
received
process.
several calls, at least 10 calls from people who've turned in all their paperwork to the processing center at Hakubotan and did not receive anything from the government of Guam. Now they've been, I guess, told to wait for the federal war claims, the Treasury, to process them.
Yes, we've had some people that actually turned in the paperwork to both places. I know the War Claims Office has been very diligent in telling claimants which side of the fence they fall, and most of these claimants fall on the side, because we had a specific cutoff date, fall on
No.
the side of coming from
Yeah,
the federal
I have some
from
people who've
Treasury.
called who were there on day one. And so the question for me is, are we supposed to tell them there are no current war claims being issued or processed by the government of Guam? That anyone who has not been paid, even if you were in line on day one, we're going to take it up with the Treasury.
Yes, to my knowledge, there are less than 10 people where there's issues with the beneficiary that I think are still being worked through, and that may be some of the people that you mentioned made a claim on day one. I know the War Claims Office is working through that, and obviously either one payment, one payee or the other will make the payment, and we are still obviously talking to U.S. Treasury about these claimants that fall in the middle.
So you still have some that you might end up paying from the local funds, you're saying?
It's possible,
All right.
but I can't say at this moment.
Okay, in your office for expenditure of CARES Act funding, the 117 million, who is the certifying officer?
The certifying officer is whichever agency has been budgeted for it. So it's a whole series of certifying officers.
Okay. What about for the hotel quarantine facilities that were the ones that were obtained early on in the pandemic?
The quarantine facilities that were purchased under the emergency purchasing, I think the governor has spoken about this as to why it was done that way, and the governor has instructed us how to pay for those quarantine facilities that were obtained under that emergency purchase, which is to be contrasted with emergency procurement, which is the regular.
All right,
The regular
so
method.
I had asked you this at that oversight hearing regarding those hotels, but are you saying there's no certifying officer for those
Well,
expenditures?
it's under governor's instruction because she gave the instruction to make the emergency purchase. So included in that was an instruction as to how to make up the payment.
So is that a no certifying officer?
Well, I guess you
Or
could
are you saying
consider that the governor
is-
is a certifying
She's a
officer.
certifying officer? Okay.
But she didn't sign that way, right? But she's the governor, so. Right?
So how much of the $117 million has been spent without an agency certifying officer?
How much is spent?
Is or was spent of the 117 million.
How much did we pay out on those particular claims?
On any claims without a
Well, no, but
certifying officer.
There were no others except for those quarantine facilities and the associated food and laundry services, and that was about 2.2 million.
Senator Therese, maybe, Mr. Burns, can you give us an update on where we at on the CARES funding total package and give us a report back? Maybe
Yes.
that would be the
Yes.
appropriate question
Yes,
would be.
yes, and indeed-
On whatever the governor did budget for, give us a status where it's all at.
Yes,
That's what we need to know.
Yeah, maybe I could just expand on that, if I may. We are now required to make reports to the US Treasury on CARES Act funding. The first report was sent in on Friday. It's only about 7 lines because it's a preliminary report. Like I said, everything's changing all the time. We are told that the report that's going to be due at the end of September, the next quarter, is going to be much more detailed. That report and the subsequent reports are going to be posted on the governor's website.
Okay, but we also, we did overwrite the bill, transparency. Please just provide us a report.
Yes.
And let's just move on from there. Senator Therese, do you have anything else on the budget?
No, thank you. I'm looking forward to that CRER this month. And yeah, like I said, the more information that we can get prior to our deliberations on the budget, I think the better we're going to be able to determine. I guess my last question, Mr. Chair, would be, is any of the $10 million that was appropriated to the hospital capital improvement fund been deposited into that fund?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Senator Torres, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Chair. First of all, Mr. Byrne and Ms. Pangilinan, I just want to thank you very much for continually working through COVID and never misstepping in terms of delivery of service to our government. Your task is enormous, just looking at your presentation today, all the accounts that you manage, and we don't take that for granted. But I just had a brief question. In looking at your last slide, the summary of the FY2021 budget, there is an appropriation of $5 million for a CWA study. Is that the Competitive Wage Act?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And then I noticed also a decrease of about $6 million in teeds and leases. What was that attributable to?
It's to do with the way it's treated. Maybe that might be a little bit misleading because obviously the lease is a lease and we have to pay it out as it comes. Maybe we could make it a little bit clearer as to what happened there, and we'll do that separately.
It is, as you will agree, a very stark decrease, and it certainly caught my attention. And then you also mentioned with regard to retiree health that there is also a decrease in the number for 2021 of about 2.8 million, and you indicated that there is potentially a gap and that number will be adjusted?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, all right, thank you. The only other question I had that hasn't been fully exhausted, and excuse me if I don't, if it was answered already, but in looking at your slide, say if you go to the division of accounts slide, the third one, or the second one of the recurring challenges that I see throughout is the lack of interface with other agencies, for your software, DOA, being able to interface and share information with other agencies and divisions. And, we spoke a little bit today about how the CARES Act is going to supplement some of those shortfalls and that you also are investing in some equipment and software. But do you have, Mr. Byrne, a solid plan to address that challenge that seems to be a predominant challenge to the efficiency of the Department of Administration?
Yes, Senator, thank you for raising that. That is part of the reason, and certainly will be part of the specification for the new system. What we don't have at this time is a very good interface between other systems and, as you were saying, and the regular FMIS system. That's a facility which is normally available in accounting systems, that you can import information in an electronic format. No matter what the other system is, the other system will produce a report, and that can simply be imported into the main accounting system. We really don't have that facility at the moment, but it will be a facility in the new system that we're seeking.
And that most needs to occur between revenue and taxation and DOA, is that correct? Or
Yes.
anybody interested in following the budget?
Yes, but that's not the only agency where we need information in a more digestible format. We have some requirements also with public health as well as DRT, and those are the two biggest cash flows that we have to deal with in the government. Because the public health deals with Medicaid and MIP, and DRT, as you know, deals with tax collections and other types of collections like use tax. And none of this is very easy to import in a digestible format, and that's one of the specs that we're going to put into the new system.
Yes, thank you for raising that point, because we did need to. I think at some point that tends to be the bane with everybody is, how do we have access to information, and how do we, the person receiving the information, or receiving the revenues, and the person dispensing the revenues, it should be more fluid. And I just want to end by, I don't have any much else to bring up, and a lot of it has been discussed already, but I just want to express that in looking at all the accounts that you're in charge of and all the agencies that you administer to, your task is certainly the central task for the efficiency of the government of Guam. And I just want to commend your staff for working through, while many of us were not able to, never losing a step in working through this whole COVID pandemic. And Sizuas Maasi for all you do.
Thank you. We'll pass that on to the staff, and I know they'll be very happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Charles. Senator Will. Oh, he's gone. Oh, all right. Senator Tello, you have one follow-up, and then we will close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. Mr. Byrne, when it comes to salaries, is there a guideline that DOA follows with regards to how much an individual is to get paid, whether they're classified or not classified?
Well, for classified employees, we have a scale, right? And the job description fits you into that scale. Mm-hmm. For unclassified employees, by and large, we try and fit people into that scale, but you don't have to pay somebody who's unclassified according to that scale, especially if they're in, like the governor's office or in some special position. But maybe you want to talk more about that.
One.
We actually do have a executive pay plan where it mirrors how the department heads and their assistants or deputies are being paid. So we do follow that, and it can be obtained from us if you need to see that plan.
So there is a pay plan, but doesn't, like you said, Mr. Byrne, it doesn't have to always necessarily follow that pay plan.
No, but we generally do. I mean,
Okay.
that's, I would say, no. I would say 95% of the employees follow that pay plan, follow the established pay plan.
On the unclassifieds?
Yes.
Do you see any salaries under the unclassifieds that are exorbitant over the guided pay plan?
No.
At this time, no, you don't see any. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Therese, you have one
Thank you,
question?
Mr. Chair. Yeah, just one question. So on your spreadsheet, it shows again for the general fund, you were appropriated FY20 6.8 million. You expect to spend 6.9 million in FY20, which is a little bit over your appropriation. But your FY21 request is at 7.2 million, which is about, I don't know, a million over or less than that. But you don't expect that there will be a need to reduce this FY21 general fund request based on any of the impacts from the COVID pandemic?
No, Senator, you know, the CARES Act money at this moment is not unlimited. You know, there's a limit, and that budget that you received, divided it up. That was by general agreement between the agencies. So you know, there are lots of demands on the CARES Act money. So we still need to have our regular, please, our regular appropriation.
For FY21, but
For
you think the
FY21.
revenues are going to meet that?
Well, this was done, you know, when revenues were computed right at the beginning of I think it was January or
Right,
early
this year.
February. That's something that BBMR will be. I know they're working with OFB on that as we speak.
All right, well, that's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
because, yeah, the public seems to believe we are going to have to amend our revenue estimates, but
Yeah.
none of the agencies seem to believe that at this point. All right, thank you, Mr. Byrne, Mrs. Pangilinan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. The committee will conclude the budget hearing on the Department Administration. And we'll continue to receive testimonies. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. @gmail.com. Since Masi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This budget hearing on Bill 282-35 relative to the Department of Administration is now adjourned. It is now 11:17. Thank you, Mr. Burns, Ms. Pangilinan. Thank you.